I'm inside of a store and I notice a Korean woman following me. I go to one rack, she follows me there. I go to the shoe section, she follows me there. I go to the bags, she follows me there. And at the time, I remember thinking, is she following me because I'm black? Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to have you here. On this channel, I am documenting and sharing stories and thoughts and life lessons about what it's like to be in the in-between phase of life. No. It turns out that in Korean culture, associates following people is just there to help you in case you need help. But I didn't know that. And the thing is, I did a lot of research before coming here. I watched all of the videos on YouTube at the time. I called up friends who had taught in other countries in Asia. I thought I knew what I was getting myself into, and yet there were still some surprises. I'm going to be speaking from my experience as a Black woman, as a Black American, as a Nigerian American living here. Let's get into it. So, on today's episode, I mentioned a story that happened when I came here almost 8 years ago now, and when I was in Myeongdong. I think now Korea is definitely, the vibes is different. There's a big difference from how Korea used to be when I first came here versus now. And I will say I'm keeping these tips kind of more generic, but I'm going to be so honest and I'm going to be very transparent because I think that a lot of people either want to talk too badly about Korea for the clout or they just want to say what's popular. I hope that what I have to say is relatable and gives you the best information in deciding about living and coming to Korea. First type of question I usually get asked is, how will I be perceived as a Black woman in Korea? And to that, obviously it's multifaceted. We are just making generalizations here. Being perceived is something that I don't always like. I want to be perceived whenever I want to be perceived, but I would say it's a little bit better. Now, keep in mind, there's a big difference between living in Korea and you're in a bigger city versus you're living in the countryside. I feel like the countryside probably hasn't changed all that much, but that varies. However, if you're living in the city, these days, you're probably people, please, there's Black people everywhere. You're not going to be stared at as much. No one really touches my hair or bothers me anymore. I mean, funny things do still happen. The other day, a guy told me that he likes my skin because I look like a hard-boiled egg. Is that because he doesn't know English well, or did he mean to tell me and compare me to a hard-boiled egg? I don't know. You decide. But being perceived as a Black woman in Korea is definitely interesting. And I think this could probably be how Black women are perceived in general around Asia. The sexual curiosity also still exists as well. And I definitely think as a woman, you've got to use your tuition. Personally, Korean men, despite what you might see in the dramas and in the music, they are just like any other men. I know there's a trend of Hongdae guys going around, and there's more and more stories about F boys here in Korea because that's how men are. But that I feel like could be a dangerous generalization because you also don't want to attract those kinds of people. Not that you do anything to attract those, but yeah, like men are just men here. Don't treat them with any special, like, oh, they're Korean, they're gonna be oppa. Like, no, just use the same wit about you like you would in your home country here. So I would say when I first came here, and especially when I was living in the countryside, I had experiences where, yes, my hair has been touched without my permission. I remember one time on a bus, this Ajuma just like raked her hair through my braids. I almost swung at her until I saw she was like a 60-year-old woman. I've had sometimes taxi drivers don't want to pick me up. I've had people, like one time the bus driver randomly played Tupac the second I got on the bus. And nowadays I don't really hear buses with music, but in the countryside things are different. Nowadays none of that's really happening. I also don't really live in the countryside though, so I think when it comes to being a Black woman in Korea, you also have to keep in mind, I think Korea is very heavily influenced by Western media, movies, books, whatever's going on, and depending on what's going on Western media wise, it could play into how people perceive Black women. And I think it also your nationality. If you are an American versus European versus African also plays a big role. My biggest tip would be to take the experiences as they come and learn to trust your own gut, because the people who are going to treat you because you are Black, fetishize you, you will be able to tell. And I think it's up to you to have that discernment of like, I'm not for this, and be respectful if you can't be, but just like, you don't have to take it. I remember when I first came here, I wanted to be not assimilate and be Korean, but I wanted to be so respectful of the culture. And I didn't want to be that like stereotypical American that's loud. I wanted to be like, oh my God, like I'm a good American. And it led me down a path of like accepting things and behaviors that I was like, I don't accept for this. Now it's a 180 because that's not what's happening. And I'm not afraid to like, no, no. Yeah, I'm not afraid to put people in their place, whether they're Koreans or foreigners. But yeah, there could be a perception of how Black women are treated here. But I like to take that into my own power and be like, how can I use this to my advantage? Because that can be a thing too. I I will, yeah, if you can, use it to your advantage. Sometimes people are curious about me, curious about what I look like or how my hair changes. If I had my hair really short and I had braids next, I was like, I can grow my hair super fast. You can't? I don't know. Just I let it be silly, teachable moments. But at the same time, I personally don't think it's always my responsibility as a Black person to educate you. The internet is free. If I'm in a good mood, sure, but not my responsibility. But it's a training curve. I would say if you're first time coming to Korea and you're worried about this, don't be. You're probably going to be in good hands. And especially if you're going to the cities, bigger areas, there's already so many Black people here, you'll be fine. But if you're going to go to the more rural and countryside, be open to having interesting experiences. Not always bad ones, mind you, just interesting. So the second question kind of leads into the first ones. I get asked a lot about the beauty standards or unspoken beauty expectations in Korea. And the thing is, I don't know because I don't always pay attention to it. I kind of have always beaten the rhythm of my own drums, and I don't like conforming to what is quote unquote popular. However, here are some differences between Korea and Western countries. I'm going to just compare to America because that's where I'm from. In Korea, people here are very trendy, but in my opinion, not that fashionable. I don't find Koreans to be fashionable. There, I said it. As a whole, big generalization. Trendy, yes, but like everyone's got the same trend. I've lived here almost 8 years, and the color wheel hasn't really changed. It's basically always the tan, the gray, the navy, and if you're feeling fancy, a pastel here and there. In 8 years, there's not that much individuality. But I think that when it comes to foreigners, and especially Black women, we can either have two things. You could either be accepted into the beauty standards. I mean, and when I say accepted, it's just Korean beauty standards are hard for Koreans anyway. So if that's already how they treat their own people, I'm not holding my breath. So if you are able to assimilate into that and fit what their perception of a beauty standard is for foreigner, that works. More often than not, as a Black person, there is no expectation. When it comes to fitting in, being part of the Korean beauty standards, I definitely think you should play to what works for you, not try to be like them. Because honestly, as we know, I personally feel like Black women stay setting the standards, stay setting the trends. So why would you want to be a trend follower when you could be a trend starter? I would say though, if you're not used to standing out, like you already are going to stand out anyway, like completely. So this makes you stand out more. But then again, this plays into the first thing. Like sometimes people are just gonna be like, oh, look, a Black person. No one's batting an eye. I would say within Asia, Koreans, they're curious, but they are not going to be as more like touch you or whatever. Not here. So question number 3 is usually about housing and how to settle in Korea. What kind of housing and rental contracts, like what can you expect in that regard? Where you live is going to be a huge portion of how happy and settled you are in this country. But I think this depends, because if you're coming to Korea and you are a student versus a teacher or whatever other visa, that is going to play a role in your housing. As we know, if you are an English teacher, your academy or public school is going to choose your home. And if your academy is choosing your home, obviously you won't really have a say in it. But I remember for me, my first time choosing my own home was like 5 years into living here. And I'd been a teacher for like the first 5 years being here. So I never did anything. I just like moved into wherever my job already had. I remember I was gonna get this place in like the Shilim area, which I know people say is really sketchy, but like it was one of the cheaper areas of Seoul. And the Budongsan guy, like the real estate agent, was pressuring me so much to sign the contract there and then. I was just like, bruh, I want to look at other places. So I would say my biggest tip when it comes to housing in Korea is don't sign a lease unless you're comfortable and confident. Um, have a Korean speaking friend or hire someone to go with you so that you're not tricked into getting an apartment or something like that that you're not comfortable with. Because sometimes they pressure you. Or if you can, find a bilingual real estate agent. Nowadays, especially now if you're living in Seoul, not like how it used to be, Facebook is a wonderful place to find so many resources. Join many Facebook communities and ask your questions. Most foreigners and people living here are so willing to be like, oh, this is who I use for this area. And so you can find good help. But I would also say if you're coming here as a teacher, try to find a way, save money, get your own housing. That's the number one step to have your own freedom. If you want to transition out of living here as an expat and be an immigrant, like I identify as an immigrant here, I'm living here for a long time, I have long-term goals here, I'm not an expat. So I don't have the same goals as an expat would, or when I was an expat, I thought of how to live here differently. So that's another thing that would play a role, but we can get into that later. But I would definitely say if you can, find a way to have your own housing. Also, I've started to see or hear that like even with public schools, sometimes the academies or public schools, they just give a housing stipend more these days as opposed to giving housing. Like the times have changed. This is one of the other questions I get is how is life here as a long-term foreigner? So if you feel like you want to live and move and relocate to Korea and you want to make Korea your home, what is that like? Because like I said, how I'm going to live in Korea as an expat, if I'm only here for 1 or 2 years, a few months versus like living here permanently, totally different. I have my own personal reasons why I'm wanting to live here full term, long term. And I'm very happy with it. But that doesn't mean that I can't still say my grievances and complain and be very honest about it. The first thing is definitely doing your homework with your visas. So if you're here in the long term, you can apply for long-term residency visas. There's different avenues to go into that. I'm sure there's so many videos about that. Another thing you could do is look into alternate visas. It's a little bit more competitive, but it isn't impossible. I recommend going to sites like Ceramin or Cowork, and you could find a job that is in the field or career you want. So if you have background in IT or social media marketing, so different spectrums, right? But there are jobs for that. I've seen a job for hotel management. The caveat mostly is proficiency in speaking Korean. So, for example, you could come into Korea as a student. Maybe then you can apply for a job seeking visa. Then, from a job seeking visa, you apply for an E7 visa because you are working in hotel management or whatever. Now you work for this hotel. You work there for 3 to 5 years, depending, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but you have the same consistent visa for 3 to 5 years, then you apply for the residency visa. So like it's a long-term plan. So of course you think of things differently. Or if you come here as a teacher, after 3 years, saving your money, you found a way, got your own housing. Now you can apply for the long-term, the resident visa. And then even from there, you can apply for a long-term resident visa. So there's so many options. The biggest thing would come into getting that, being an expat to an immigrant, would be your salary. How much money do you make? Your Korean proficiency level. And there's so many things to it. But I think because it's such a long term, like it takes kind of different many steps, you kind of want to come into Korea knowing maybe you don't have to have all the answers. But if you, after a year of living here, ask yourself what you're feeling. To be honest, Korea is not the only country out here that it gives you so many things about living abroad. So if you still feel like it's not the country for you, don't be scared to leave or go somewhere or try something new. I feel like I see a lot of foreigners who are living here, lived here for a long time, kind of jaded about it, or like don't have the experience they want, but don't want to go home. They're stuck in this rut. I don't think that's really productive, but I would just kind of have an open heart, open mind about where you are in life, what you want out of your life, and see if Korea fits that. And then another thing about living in another country long term is about your community, which leads me into question number 5. And that's about how to make friends and have a community when you live in a foreign country. Having community and having friends is so important. We as humans, I don't think we're meant to live and like be alone, right? But it is kind of difficult when I'm on the Facebook groups or Reddit groups, and not just with foreigners, also with Koreans. There's like a big thing of loneliness and wanting to make genuine friends, which on one hand, I think it's actually kind of nice because, again, 7 years ago when I first came here, when especially if you were in the countryside, you just like click and become friends with someone just because they live next to you. And that's a big thing. Proximity is a huge factor in friendships. And of course, it's so easy to get lonely as you get older, you get pickier, but it is not impossible. There's so many ways to make friends. I'm part of different friend groups, and there's people who make a lot of community events on Facebook, Kakao Talk, and I think now I'm seeing more of a shift where people want to be intentional about their friends. For example, after living here for a while, a lot of friends I've made have come and go. So now when I'm trying to make friends, and I want to make friends with people who are kind of have more things in common with me, maybe they want to live in Korea for a longer time. So nowadays it's really interesting because the dynamics of how foreigners get together have changed. Or maybe it's just me and I'm just at this part of my life. I'm sure if you're here and you're 24 and your first year, maybe it's different. I don't know. I've had my second puberty, I call it. I've grown up into adulthood in a foreign country. So that's just been my experience. It's been interesting. But I would say it's not impossible. The biggest thing, though, I would say, and this might be controversial, I feel like you kind of have to get used to loneliness to some degree or get creative. I would say don't leave your friends from your home country. Schedule those Skype calls, send each other mail each other gifts when you can. After the tariffs are over, I don't know when that's going to end, but keep in touch with the people who keep you grounded, even if they live far. The groups are out here. Once again, your Facebook groups, the Kakao groups, like going out, meeting people, you're going to make friends. And honestly, you can make lifelong best friends. You'll meet them here, possibly. Making and finding your community here might be challenging, but it won't be impossible. I can guarantee that. I hope these tips help. There's going to be a lot of information and research. You can go on Reddit, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and there's a lot of years worth of information. And I just want to make sure that you are well informed so that you can make the best possible choice for yourself when you choose to move to another country. Because it's so brave. You're doing something so brave and you're doing something so scary, but it's going to be wonderful. But I definitely want to make sure that you have all the information you need. And there is a cat behind me. Okay. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all of that jazz. And I'll see you in the next one, friend. Thanks for being here. This has been Sincerely Showa. Bye.